Depends on where you're at. I hope everyone's doing well. We'll go ahead and post the slides in case you did not grab those on the first round. Here we go. And just any random questions from the last time we met while I get my share screen set up. All right, seems like a no. Just to make sure everyone can hear me, just to be 1000% sure there. Yes, okay, there we go. I got one yes, that's all I needed. Thank you. Okay, and chat going. Okay, so today there's our third meeting of the CARS/verbal reasoning lectures. As always, I do just a really quick review of the other stuff we've done, because all these strategies kind of add on together. So again, today is lecture 3. Review of lecture 1, we had the reading approach, and this is something that ideally we've all been working on since that day. And even though it's one thing to do, it's the process that's really important, and it just takes a lot of time to really hone it in and to really find out how to be super efficient with your reading, and then how to apply highlights and all that. So it's a time-consuming process, even though this is a one-page approach. And then we also had reviewed how to review questions, and this, as I've mentioned before, is true of any multiple choice exam you ever take in your entire life. Oh, Phyllis, yeah, let me post them again. I think maybe you came in a little late. Let me go. Boom. All right, does anyone else? I just posted the slides. I'm assuming that would take care of anyone else that came in as well. So I guess to be sure, did everyone have the slides? I know sometimes people can't download them from the chat, so I could always try to send them a different way. All right, I think we're good. Go back to our screen. Okay, so as I was finishing off here, this is a great method for any multiple choice exam. Oh, real quick, Phyllis, do you need another way to access the slides? Maybe that's the better question. Because yeah, some devices can't get it through chat sometimes. All right, give me a second. Actually, I think I have it on a Google link somewhere in my drive. Give me everyone else, just some patience. Talk amongst yourselves. I think I already have it ready to go. I just need to go find it. Okay, here's a Google link drive for the slides for today. I hadn't looked at them. They should be updated. I don't think they're any different from what we have today, but if there's differences, they're minor, and I wouldn't worry about them. Leandro asked, can you repeat if we're supposed to read the questions first? That's actually what we're going to review today. So we haven't reviewed that yet. So, and yeah, no problem, Phyllis. I think I set this up last time. There was a ton of people that couldn't get them through chat, so I made everything a link, but it didn't seem to be a problem this time. So I just hadn't done it yet. So, as I said, it's I don't think there's any changes, and if there are, they're not significant. So, if anything is really off, just let me know, and I'll upload the new version. So, okay, going to chapter 2, lecture 2. Then the only new thing we added really was reviewing the question types. And the reason we had done this is because a lot of CARS is self-analysis, right? How do you as a student read the passage? How do you as a student read the question and interpret that? How do you then match all those together? And so in the process of like kind of relearning how to read for the MCAT, if you will, and relearning what it means to be efficient for the MCAT, we're also going to look at how we're approaching those questions. And the same questions apply, right? How are you going to be, how efficient are you going to be on the questions? Are you really catching on the phrases you need? Are you paying attention to the different kinds of questions and like things to assume are true and versus what you shouldn't? So again, just it's like the self-analysis process, and this was just furthering that. And then today, we're going to do, this is like I said, lecture 3. We're going to do a strategy overview then. And from the first 2 lectures, we had the verbal approach, which was, as we've discussed, should be a 4 to 5 minute process for the reading. And then we have our question approach, which gives you about 5 to 6 minutes total. And really, so between these 2, you have 10 minutes, and you just want to balance those 10 minutes out between doing the reading, doing the questions, and moving on. Today, then, per Leandro's comment, I guess that was direct, we are going to review what it means to read the questions first. I put in parentheses there optional, and I say optional because it's just a strategy that some people really like to use as part of their main strategies, while some people don't. And if you find that it's useful and it doesn't like take away your timing or mess with your timing, then go ahead and please use it. If you find that it doesn't really help you or it takes away from your timing strategy, then if you don't use it, you'll be okay. I fall into one that categories that I never really liked doing it, though I think on the front end I didn't do it well. Over time, I've learned to see how it can be useful, but I'm just used to not doing it, so I don't. So not the be-all end-all, but it can be very useful if you use it wisely. We're also going to discuss skimming, and this is what you'll do if you are running out of time. So this is like, you don't have 10 minutes to go, you only have 6, and what do you do? That's kind of what we're going to review today. And the reason we do that, because, in the 90-minute process of doing the 9 passages, you might come up on this, and we just want to make sure you don't have to have this like expertly ready. You just want to make sure you have a backup plan for if you're running a little bit out of time. And the one thing I do say here at the bottom is if you do decide to skim, it's also wise to read the questions first, because at that point you are running out of time and you just want to like, okay, answer maybe the easy ones or the ones that are a little more obvious first. But so we're going to review the process regardless. You want to use it with skimming, and then you may or may not use it with your main strategies. Michaela asked here, I was wondering if you would advise us to go back and go over answers once we finish all of them and have time on the test. If you have time on the test, yes, use that time to your advantage. Most people will not have extra time at the end. So, but if you find yourself in the category of people who actually have extra time, there's a couple things you can do with that. If you find like you're not happy with your score, and you have the extra time, well, maybe using a little extra time per passage, like using it in the process as opposed to at the end, without messing up your flow. And then also, allowing some questions just to go a little longer. So you can kind of adjust as you go. And Michaela, I think we always all second guess ourselves all the time. So that's, I think, just a part of MCAT process. I personally, again, this is me, I never had time extra at the end of my CARS. So I would really take those 10 minutes and just kind of move forward with that. Some passages, if I was lucky, I'd kind of get it beforehand, and that would save time for other passages. But I was always kind of at the 10-minute mark, and even a little behind when I did the MCAT. This was definitely something I had struggled with during the MCAT process. But again, if you have extra time, you could decide to use it at the end, or you can dole out a little bit of extra time for yourself per passage and go from there. Okay, so what we're going to do today then is we're going to review these optional strategies, and then we're going to do some passages. We're going to review the process first. The first optional strategy is to read the questions first. In this case, what you're doing is you're reading the question stems before you even read the passage. So instead of going to the passage and reading as normal, you're going to go to the questions and scroll through all of them and just quickly look at the questions. And what you're in essence doing is just reading the question stem, not looking at the answers. This can give you insight into what you're going to read about. It can kind of just give you maybe some key phrases or words to look for. And that's typically what people like doing this. It kind of helps them focus if they can do it this way. Yeah, as I just said, the idea here is to look for clues in the question stem that relate to the passage. Obviously, I haven't read it yet, but think subject, verb, things like that in the question stem, and that can give you an indication of what's going on. Some people then, as you read, they like to mark the passages they read. Like they're in paragraph 2, they're like, oh, that was like question 3 or something like that. Some people like to answer it in the moment, which depends on your timing and depends if you think more information will be given later. It can be useful. As I mentioned, you can answer in the moment or as you go. Then regardless, once you're done reading the passage, as you get back to the questions, right, make sure you've related the question stem correctly to what you now have just read. So the idea here really is that you're giving yourself a little like pre-insight as to what you might be seeing, but you're also giving yourself a little bit of the pre-clues, if you will, to the passage. And so we'll read this on a passage just to see how we can match those things up. Any questions just on the kind of the layout of the process? Okay, going then to the next strategy. Here we have skimming the passage. So the idea here is that, again, you are running out of time, and you want to have a way to be able to get through an entire passage with some knowledge of the answer. You don't want to just be guessing C's or B's or whatever the current choice is. But you want to have some knowledge of the passage so that you can have some knowledge of the answers, and then at least answer some correctly. The idea here that was we're going to shave off 2 minutes from our reading in our questions. So instead of 4 to 5 minutes for the reading, you're taking 3 minutes to read because you're not going to read everything. And then instead of taking 5 to 6 minutes for the questions, you're going to take just 3 minutes for the questions, giving you that 6 minutes total. You know, obviously, if you have like 7 or 8 minutes, you know, you can kind of like fudge it a little bit, and you just got to decide how much skimming versus how much reading you're going to do. Okay. So again, 6 minutes is the goal here. And in terms of the process, at least the first part is as normal. You're going to read the first paragraph first, which is, again, the normal process. What you're assuming here is that this is the main idea. And this is an important assumption to remember for this process. If your main idea is in the first paragraph, the rest of these steps will really help you and make sense. If it's not, it might be a little tricky. This is why I say skimming the passage isn't always the best strategy. It fits really well for some passages. Like it would probably fit pretty well in the Gandhi passage, but not so much on that first passage with the, what was it, the AFM and the RI, right? Because of the second step, right? So second step here, and this is the tricky step, is you're going to read all the middle paragraphs, the first and last sentences only. So you're not going to read like all the details or all the information about like how these things work. You're just going to read first and last sentence, which again, we're assuming that's in parentheses. We're assuming that's given us the topic and conclusion of every paragraph. Again, not all paragraphs are written this way. So this is why it's important to know the assumptions. What you're doing by skipping the middle, sometimes it's actually good. You're kind of like skipping the details, which is not a bad thing. But then you still have to like make connections between everything, and that could be the tricky part, right? So how I'm making connections from one paragraph to another if I haven't necessarily read everything, and sometimes that can be tricky. But you know, if you're lucky, it's going to be in the topic and conclusion, and you might be okay. And then the last step is sort of the opposite of the first step. Is you're just going to read that last paragraph, and again, this is the same as what you did before. And the idea here is that the author's going to give you the conclusion. You can read the full conclusion and then kind of go from there. Okay. As I've already mentioned before, when skimming, you also want to read questions first. This just kind of may give you a clue into how to answer something quickly, especially if we're running out of time. At the end of the day, you want to have everything have an answer, right? Because you don't want to leave any question without an answer. There's no points taken off for wrong answers. So get a choice up on every single answer. Okay. I know we've talked about it theoretically. Any questions on the process of these two? And then we'll do this on a passage together to make it a little more obvious to what's going on. Okay, so here is a passage then. And again, don't start this on your own. We're going to review these two techniques on this passage. Let me just go find it. Here we go. And then Phyllis, let me just go get the link. Okay, does everyone have passage number 7, the Armenian alphabet? I guess, does anyone need it? Is probably the better question. No problem, Phyllis. Does anyone need that passage? I'm gonna get it up and running on the share screen as well. Here we go. Everyone got it. Okay, cool. Looks like we're good. And no one seems to not have it, so I think we're good. Okay, here we go. Okay, so again, don't start this on your own. We're gonna pretend we have 6 minutes to go, and we're gonna therefore rush this process, but really review the process of what it means to skim. And, oh, come on, Zoom. Sorry, Zoom took over my screen for a second. I can't do anything. Oh, Zoom. Give me a second. I'm gonna have to reshare that. Okay, let's see if this works. Now I can move things around. Okay, so everyone should be able to see the passages that I just passed out. So again, we're going to pretend we have these 6 minutes to go, and we're going to review the process of the optional strategies on this passage. As always, you want to read the reference, right? So that's always going to be step 1 anyway. I don't know why I can't highlight that, but there you go. In this case, it's adapted from G. Bernouchian, A History of the Armenian People, Volume 1. It's a pretty broad topic. You know your Armenian history, you might be in business here. Chances are this is too broad to really help us. And then if you remember, before we're going to skim, we're going to actually read the questions first. So we always want to do that up front. So in this case, if we look at number 1, it says, according to the passage, the first new literary work composed in the Armenian alphabet language using the alphabet invented by Master Mastats was blank. So again, we're not looking at the answers, we're not even trying to answer this now. The question is, what are some clues from this question stem we want to pick up on? Like, what are some maybe key phrases, subject, verb, anything like that? Like, what's important to pick up on that then you can take back with you to the passage as you read? You could just say it out loud or throw it into chat. Yeah, so we can look for this fellow Mesrop Mashtats. That can be a little broad though. What else? What about him, or what about the process here that we should be looking at? It could be something about the Armenian language, Armenian alphabet, right? So the couple things I know. Notice it says according to the passage, right? So I would just note that. I wouldn't necessarily highlight that, but it's something that's in the passage. And here, really, like the subject of this, it would be that, right? But we could tell that these other things are all related, right? So that's what we're looking for. And yeah, probably something to do with the alphabet. Seems this alphabet invented, right, leads you right to that. So I'd almost focus on the alphabet more than the language, just because that seems the new thing, if you will, right? And again, I wouldn't go further than that. Just kind of like look for subject, verb, maybe the kind of question stem can help you understand it as you're reading through it. So that if you come up to it in the passage, you understand, oh, it's a straight from the passage answer versus it's an implication question. For number 2, it says the author mentions that Mesrop Mashtats, the creator of the Armenian alphabet, had been well versed in secular law and the military arts before devoting himself to religious life, most likely in order to show blank. So what's important here? And again, we're not super analyzing, just what should we be looking for, which we point out to ourselves so that we can match it up when we read. Jonathan here says, I'll highlight his name, secular law, short, yeah. And honestly, what you're looking for, again, you don't want to overanalyze it. You're just looking for the quote, and then you're going to answer something about the quote, right? Ultimately, that's what you want to match. You're not analyzing now, so the simplest thing is like, look for quote, answer question, right? And then move on, because we're not analyzing currently. Question 3, the Armenian church faced which of these problems in the 5th century AD according to the passage? What's important here, which we point out to ourselves? Yeah, church-based problems, right? Notice, yeah, notice this is according to the passage problem. Notice it's also a Roman numeral question problem, which means you're going to be looking for answers in various places. So in terms of like, I'm running out of time, this one might take you a little extra. You know, like I would note to myself, maybe do this one last. Because when I have the Roman numerals, especially on like these topics, it's like I could be running around looking for stuff. You know, I would say problems in this case, right? Okay, number 4, the translation of works into Armenian using the new Armenian alphabet had the effect of blank. What's going on here? What's important in question 4 in terms of the question stem itself? Yeah, effects of, yeah, I would say had the, we're looking at the effect, right? Number 5, the Syrian church was able to exert considerable influence over the Armenian church in the late 1st century, according to the passage, because what's important here? Yeah, we had one church influence over the other. Also note the 4th century, I think problem 3 had 5th century. So we have different time frames to look at, which can be important, right? Let's say, just this influence part is going to be the important part. Then we go up to 6. What can one infer from the passage, as the most likely reason their previous attempts to create an Armenian alphabet failed? Right, so here, notice it's like, unlike the other questions, this is an inference question, means the answer you're getting is not something the author said, right? And something about the previous attempts failing. That's the subject we're looking at in terms of the inference, right? And then the last question doesn't really need a lot of analysis. The main point of the idea of the passage is that blank, so you're always looking for that anyway. There's nothing we can gather from the question stem to help us while we read, right? You got to be doing this no matter what. Okay, any questions on just how to read the questions first and how to interpret them, even though we're not really going too far in the interpretation? Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna, here was number 1. Cool. Any other questions on how to read the questions first? So Jonathan's question, would you suggest jotting down an idea for each question? You could, I would actually suggest in the past, I have heard that now you can actually highlight the question stem. So I would just go with that if that is indeed what you can do. But in the past, you couldn't do that. And then, yeah, I would like question 1, just like a word or two. Question 2, a word or two, you know. Someone asked about defining the question stem. That's just where it says number 1, according to the passage, blah, blah, blah. So everything before the answers. Cool. Any other questions on how to read the questions first? Before we get into doing the skimming part. Okay, so then just give it a few seconds before, in case people realize I had a question. So then the process of reading the questions first, the process of skimming is you read the entire first paragraph like normal, and then for everything else, we're going to read the first and last paragraphs to figure out what's going on. So I'll go ahead and do the last part, but I want someone to read the first paragraph. And we're going to treat it like a normal paragraph. You know, we're going to analyze it and highlight it like normal. So who wants to take a shot at the first paragraph? And again, we're going to read it like a normal paragraph.
Hey, Patricio, I can go ahead. It's Lexi.
Thank you, Lexi. I figured someone would eventually volunteer. Go ahead, read the first paragraph out loud.
The most momentous event of the Ar-Shakuni period was the invention of the Armenian alphabet. Prior to the 5th century, Armenians used Greek for artistic and cultural expression, Latin and both versions of Middle Persian scripts for official communications and inscriptions, and Syriac for their liturgy. Because the majority of Armenians could not read or write, Armenia had a rich oral tradition. History was not recorded, but recited from memory and sung by Armenian and Persian gusans or minstrel poets.
Awesome, Lexi, thank you so much. Okay, so what's going on in this paragraph? Again, we're going to read it like a normal paragraph, and we're just going to highlight it like a normal paragraph. So what do we have going here? What would we highlight and what's going on in this paragraph? So you had most I found was. Yeah, someone said I found a lot of this to be unnecessary. Yeah, in this case, the question stems gave us a little bit of clue, which was nice. It's not always the case, but it works out in this one. But yeah, we definitely have, where's my thing? We definitely have, clearly this is an important thing. We should have gotten that from the question stems. So that's important. And then what else is going on here? So other than that first sentence, what else would seem to be important? You had a rich oral tradition, right? That's like sort of not the alphabet, but it seems, or just even just highlight that whole chunk, right? In that sense, since we highlighted the oral tradition, we really don't need to highlight anything about the gusans or minstrel poets. I mean, that's just like, it's related to that highlight, right? So like one of those is fine, but I like the oral tradition, I think probably explains it a little easier. And if we're gonna go back and just look up a term. Right? Okay, so first paragraph done. This is where it gets weird. So second paragraph, then what you're gonna do, I would just go ahead and highlight it. Highlight the first and last sentence, and then read those and try to make sense of all of it. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna just read these two things, and then we're gonna try to make sense of how it fits with what we had already previously read. So second paragraph then says, not in its entirety, both the crown and the religious leaders of Armenia saw the partition of Armenia as an event of devastating potential, blah, 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 blah. Moreover, contrary to popular tradition, Christianity did not take hold of the entire population at once. Paganism and Zoroastrianism still commanded many followers and converts. So what's going on in this paragraph? Like, how can we make sense of it relative to the first paragraph? And also for the fact that we didn't read most of it. But what can we take home from this? Yes, we have Armenia was split, okay. And it maybe wasn't split quite yet, though, right? It says, if you take from that first sentence, we saw the partition of Armenia as an event of devastating potential. So maybe it's split, or it's splitting, or it's about to split, or something like that. The answer says shifting dynamics in the country. Yeah, and then notice at the bottom. So at the top, what I notice is that we have the crown and the religious leaders. So what does that refer to? Crown and religious leaders, what does that refer to? Jonathan says positions of powers. Yeah, like what does crown refer to? But I would say yes, positions of power. Someone says separation of church and state. Yeah, but they might be separated, but they're actually on the same page. So crown in this case, yeah, refers to king, monarch, so king, queen kind of vibe. And then we also have the religious leaders. And so what you notice, at least from the first sentence, is that whether there's a separation of church and state, we don't know, but we know that these groups of people who you can assume to be like are in charge, yeah, have as Jonathan says, have a similar agenda. So they're on the same page, right? And then towards the bottom, there's like a more discussion of the religious aspect. So we know we have the leaders of the area saying that this thing is a bad thing that's going to happen or is happening. And then again, we don't know a lot of the details, but there seems to be something going on with the religion. So maybe there's like strife within the religious leaders or just, the religion in the area, right? And really beyond that, you don't want to make too many more assumptions. We're trying to just connect some ideas and move on from that, right? So we have religious and government leaders ultimately, and then something going on with the religion in the area. Any questions on paragraph 2, right? We got to like make some connections, but not go too crazy. Okay, so then we go to paragraph 3. So again, same thing. In this case, I would just highlight first and last sentence and then see what goes on from there. First sentence here says, Catholicos, Sahak, and Brashampu both understood that in order to retain any measure of ecclesiastical and political control over a partition nation, the unifying factor of the Armenian language would be crucial. Blah, 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 blah. He had traveled all over Armenia and fully recognized the threat of assimilation. So what's happened in this paragraph? Like what's happened with that paragraph on its own, and then how do we connect it to the overall situation? Yeah, so Jonathan says here, Armenian language pivotal for control. Yeah, so right there, it's and I'll even do it in a different color. The unifying factor, right? Like that's pretty important there. What else do we have? So I'm going to include both paragraphs because we want to start making connections as well. So the Armenian language is pivotal. What else do we have? They're scared the language might be lost. That could be it. You utilize an Armenian language. Yeah, so try to make connections here from even the second and the third paragraph, right? So we have this, the idea is that the Armenian language would be a unifying factor. How does that help us understand what's going on? So again, how does the unifying factor of the Armenian language help out? So here, this is more direct message. The Armenian language is going to play a large role. Yeah. So yeah, we can see that the language is going to play a large role. Someone says separation of religion can be unified through one language. Maybe, but again, we don't really know the strife going on. We just know there's stuff going on in the region. Connect it to paragraph 2. Like, how do we connect paragraphs 2 and paragraphs 3? Iman says language can prevent separation. Yeah, I mean, that's the sentence of the unifying factor, meaning language will be crucial. So I think we're touching on the right thing, but I want to just make a specific connection in terms of some of the words. I'm going to choose a different color. So here, here we have a partition nation, right? And we have the partition of Armenia. So in this case, in both cases, like we have this idea of something happening in the region, some kind of strife happening, right? And the idea here that in both cases we have the religious leaders, so the Catholicos would be related to the religious leaders. In this case, you're seeing the language as helping out with the process. But both of these paragraphs, we can see that there's strife going on in the area, right? So that's just a connection we want to make from paragraphs 2 to 3. If you go to the end of paragraph 3, then the other highlight was he had traveled all over Armenia and fully recognized the threat of assimilation. So how does this help us out? Or how can we connect this to the overall situation? Again, without reading more than what's there. Marissa says here, would it be connected to the last sentence in the first paragraph? Potentially. Part of the problem is, and again, you can easily look it up, but we don't know who this he is. But the thing that I would connect here, so he had traveled over Armenia and fully recognized the threat of assimilation. This idea of kind of like the partition nation, like whoever this person is, again, is kind of in agreement with what's going on. And again, we don't know the exact story, and so we're not going to, we don't have to dig deeper than that. But we can tell in both of these paragraphs, the government and the political and the religious leaders, like, they're all concerned something's happening. And at least from the religious leader side, they saw the issue of the languages helping out. And then whoever this other person is, maybe it's a religious figure, is also looking at what's going on. So in these two paragraphs really have like lots of strife happening in the area, and at least the religious leaders are seeing the language being a unifying factor. Okay, any questions on paragraph 3? Okay, going to paragraph 4, then again, we're going to do a similar thing. Here it is. First sentence, and then last sentence. First sentence says, Master Up and a number of his students traveled to examine different alphabets, including earlier attempts at an Armenian alphabet, and consulted calligraphers, blah, 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 blah. And notice the name Master Up came up, which we heard a lot about in the questions then. The miracle, however, was the alphabet itself, which represents the mainly distinct consonant sounds of Armenian and has remained virtually unchanged for 1,500 years. So what can we get from this paragraph? Linking the written to oral language through development of the alphabet. Okay, so it could be right because we have earlier alphabet vibes, right? We have development of the alphabet. So in terms of like question stem, we had talked about the invention of the alphabet. This is where it happened, right? Jonathan, you said same backstory to the conflict. So what do you mean by that? Okay, yeah, sort of acts as a bridge between the conflict. Yeah, or really what we know from paragraph 3 is that the language is going to help the conflict, right? So this is sort of maybe like where it's the alphabet issue is the thing that helps solve what's going on, right? And right, so if we look at the top sentence, Master Up and a number of his students traveled to examine different alphabets. It's kind of like, maybe the history of the alphabet. And then whatever happens in the middle, we can look it up later. But at the end of this paragraph, it says the miracle, however, was alphabet itself, which represents the many distinct consonant sounds. So clearly the alphabet was invented, and it was a very great thing. You can relate it almost back to the first sentence, right? The most momentous moment of the Arshakuni period is the invention of the alphabet, right? If you go back to that first sentence, that really lines up really well with this sentence, right? The miracle, however, was the alphabet itself, right? So there was like a very big deal in the moment, right? And then we're going to go ahead and read the entire last paragraph. And who wants to do that out loud? I'm going to read it like a regular paragraph and therefore highlighted it like a regular paragraph. So again, I just volunteer to read one little lonely paragraph.
I suppose I can go again.
Okay, Lexi, thank you for being so brave.
You're very welcome. So it's the last paragraph.
Yeah.
All right. Immediately thereafter, Armenians entered upon a period of, oh, it has the little sign thing. I can't read what that
Oh,
says.
sorry. Here, let me click. Give me a second.
No problem.
There you go.
I'll start again. Immediately thereafter, Armenians entered upon a period of translating major Christian and philosophical texts into Armenian. The first work to be translated was, not surprisingly, the Bible. The translation was made from the Syriac and Greek versions and is highly regarded by biblical scholars. The early translators, equipped with the new alphabet, left a legacy for Western civilization as well as a number of Syriac and Greek texts have.
Oh, sorry. I have to move that up. There we go.
Been preserved only in their Armenian translations. During the High Middle Ages and the Renaissance, when Western Europe was rediscovering the literature and culture of the classical world, these Armenian translations formed an important link to the knowledge of the past.
Thank you, Lexi. So everyone else, what's going on in this paragraph? We're going to read it like a normal paragraph. And we're going to highlight like normal, but also going to try to tie it back into everything that we had been reading. I guess I need to make this small enough as a share so we can see. So I guess we'll just go in halves. What's up with that? The first half of the paragraph. So someone says the Bible. Why is that important? And Lexi MVP. That's awesome. Here, yeah. So first work translating out the Bible seems important from a question stem. Major Christian texts, right? Notice we have something about translations, which also comes up in a question. So yeah, lots of information seems to be this. Someone says here links it to religious figures, political affiliations. Immediately after we entered a period of translation, blah blah blah. Okay, what else? So and then from maybe the last up or the top of the column, really, which is an extension right from what was started at the bottom. What's important here? You know, this idea of like leaving a legacy, and it says it in a couple of different ways. And yeah, it's showing impact in this case. So you could highlight it one of two places. I would say left a legacy for Western civilization as well. That's one place where it says it. Or you can also go to the end here. These are meaning translations for an important link to the knowledge of the past, right? And so if we notice this last paragraph is all about like what happened once the alphabet was invented, and notice that it has, you know, not just an importance for the region, right? Because the implication here is that it helped with what was going on, but it also has historical implication for outside of the region. And so this last paragraph is very like, you know, clearly pro the process and showing all the great effects of that process. Okay, any questions on how we read this paragraph, this passage rather? Obviously it's weird because we're not reading half of it. The idea is that as you're reading the first and last sentences, you're making connections to what you had read, and you're still trying to do what we did before. You're still making connections from one paragraph to another and linking things as you go through. At the end of the day, like, there's going to be no just random paragraph that's not related to what's going on. So your job is to make those connections all the way through. Okay, any questions again on how we did the reading and how we skimmed specifically? New method, yeah. And I'd say this is a new method. We do need more practice. It is not the be-all end-all method. Like, it'll work terribly for some passages and it'll work great for some. For this one, it works pretty good. If you go back to our lecture notes, it's the assumptions is really what makes the difference. If the passage fits the assumptions of how you're skimming, it'll be amazing, right? But you don't know that going into it. So this can be useful. And even for me, sometimes if I'm running out of time, but I have more than 6 minutes, less than 10, I might still kind of like pseudo skim, pseudo read. So the concepts from this strategy are still useful, right? Allowing you to like maybe focus on just what you need to focus on instead of getting lost in the detail, right? So you kind of use it in conjunction with the other one as well, though not necessarily strictly as a 6-minute method. Okay, before we get to the questions, any other questions? Sorry about that. Okay, so if we were doing this on the test, right, we'd have like 3 minutes to do what we just did, which would then leave us a whopping 3 minutes to do the question. So take 3 minutes and see if you can answer as many of these as you can. I'll give you more time at the end, but just see what it feels like for 3 minutes. And your mark it, set, go. All right, it's been 3 minutes, which probably feels really quick. Did anyone finish all 6, 7 in 3 minutes? I'm assuming most of us didn't, because it is hard to do that yeah, in 3 minutes. So the idea here is, as someone said barely, I think, so go ahead, take a couple extra minutes. The idea here is if you are doing the skim method, it's not even about getting to all 7 questions, it's answering as many as you can in that short amount of time. If you can get to all 7, great, or all 6, or whatever it happens to be. But you're kind of going to go for the ones you can answer quickly, like number 3 will waste your time. That one you should do last if you even get to it. Go ahead and take a little more time to finish off. I just want to give you a feel of what that would feel like if you were on the test. So take like 2 more minutes, and then we will reconvene. All right, does anyone need more time? I mean, I know we could always have more time, but do we really need it, or just put B or C? Just joking. Remember, it used to be that C was your best random guess. Apparently, that is now B, and I have not heard anything different. So, when in doubt, go with B. Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just jot the answers down into chat, take a couple seconds to look at them, and then we will reconvene and talk about it. You know, obviously you hadn't read the whole thing up front, so really focus on, like, based on what you had read, what would be the most, you know, the ones you can answer quickly, and then we're able to interpret that correctly. You can take a second to look at the answers, and then, as always, we'll just kind of go down one by one and discuss the ones that we need to discuss. Okay, going in order then. Any questions on number 1? That is correct, Jonathan. The trick, quote unquote, trick is that we have to read carefully. And last paragraph was all about translations and nothing else. So that's one of those, like, again, you are working quick. And it's just easy to skip that. And even if you didn't have 3 minutes, it might have happened anyway because we're working quick, right? It just happens. So this is just a reminder to be very careful with your question stem. Line up that language to what the passage is saying. Okay, number 2. Any questions on number 2? I think we're good. Okay, I think we're good there. Number 3 was one of the ones that I mentioned that was a waste of your time. So hopefully you didn't do it on the front end, but you did it on the second round. Any questions on that? Jonathan asked, do I have a specific technique? Well, no, you just have to go back and find these. As you're reading through this, we at least can look at the first 2 paragraphs as kind of where you're led to. So one of the technique is, trusting your highlights, right? We know that paragraphs like 3 and really 4 and beyond are all about the alphabet and like translation. So, you could avoid that. In this case, you had read paragraph 1, so you can kind of look there for some answers. This one did require you to read paragraph 2 sort of more, and then just start to see which one of these fit. And so, no, there's a lot of just checking. Like, you got to check the Roman numeral, see if it fits. If it doesn't, you could take it out as a choice. In terms of Roman numeral, just the standard technique of, in this case, notice 1 is in 3 of them. So I would like look at that one first, right? Because that could directly lead me to D if 1 was wrong. Things like that. But there's no way around like this not taking some time. You just got to work quickly in terms of what you have in those first 2 paragraphs. So that's what I mentioned before. I could tell this is a time waster, right? So it's just the way it's set up. You have to look at the 4 Roman numerals. You got to compare them to really know and then go from that. It's just, there's no way around it. So it basically sucks as a question, and it's just what we have to work with. That's how I think about it. 4. Okay, any questions on 4, which was B? This is a whole legacy thing we had discussed from before. Any questions on 5? Moving along. Questions on 6? Six, yeah, okay. 6, what can one infer from the passage as the most likely reason that previous attempts to create an Armenian alphabet failed? So how do we approach this kind of question? Right, that's the thing I would ask initially. How do we approach this kind of question? Right, notice it's different from an according to the passage question. So Johnson, as you can reference paragraph 1, provide some slight context. Does it ever mention anything about alphabets failing anywhere in the passage? Yeah, so it does. We actually highlighted it. So if we go to paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, we highlighted Mastrop and a number of his students traveled to examine different alphabets, including earlier attempts at an Armenian alphabet, and consulted calligraphers. So really what you're looking at is most likely the best context for this question is this paragraph. And we didn't initially read the whole thing, so I would, at this point, read the whole thing. And then try to think about, again, an inference, right? That means like your answer is not something the author said, but something that somehow is related to something the author said. And that's the key for an inference question. It's not what the author said. It's just something you can conclude from what the author said. And if we look at these answers, for example, like A is probably the closest other choice. I don't know if a lot of people picked A. And yeah, Alexandra, yeah, so that's what happens in an inference question, is that you're inferring something from the passage. So there's still like ideas in the passage that could lead you to this answer, but the answer is itself not specifically said, and that's where these can get tricky. But you still want to line things up. So if we look at, for example, A says literate Armenians already had 5 scripts used for artistic, religious, and bureaucratic purposes. So, you know, this, we know that they used other languages. This is maybe what Jonathan was talking about in paragraph 1. And so, but you know, the question is, does that explain why earlier attempts failed? That could also maybe explain why they just didn't bother prior. So, you know, maybe I wouldn't knock it out right away. B says Armenian history is preserved in oral tradition, which we know is true. And the Gusans who sang and recited it were opposed to having it written down. So this to me, you know, while maybe it's plausible, it's just, it doesn't really connect you to anything in the passage about the Gusans. So we'd have no reason to connect the Gusans to them opposing to write it down. Like if you chose B, you can also argue that they love the idea and helped out. Like we just don't have anything to let us decide one way or the other. So B is really speculation, right? Because we can't really make sense of that last part. C says that earlier alphabets were suppressed by the Byzantine and personal authorities in Armenia. So again, this one, it might be, we know there's strife and partitioning in the area. We just don't know about the full suppression. And so again, we just don't have a harder way to connect it. And then what the answer is, the reason it is, but I'll read it. None of the previous alphabets accurately represented all of the sounds that are unique to Armenian language. If you go to that paragraph of where they invented the alphabet, you know, they looked at earlier attempts and all that, we actually highlighted the reason, which leads us to D. The miracle, however, was the alphabet itself, which represents the many distinct consonant sounds of Armenia, and it remained virtually unchanged for 1,500 years. Right, so Mastrop and his group of whatever histographers or whatever, calligraphers, etc. Right, they came up with such a great alphabet because it represented all the sounds, and notice it has not been changed for many, many, many years. And that's really, like I said, this question is leading you paragraph 4. Really want to just make the interpretation from this paragraph, and D is the only one that fits anything even having been said in this paragraph. And does it make sense how to approach this kind of question? In general, these kinds of questions are the harder ones on the MCAT, right? There's, when we reviewed question types, right, the comprehension and comprehension and I forget what they're called, but the first 2 question types, they're more like, you know, what's in the passage, how is it built? But then you get to the application and the new information ones, and this is where it feels like a little more subjective, but the goal is you still need to connect it to the passage, right? So if you not connecting to the passage, it's going to feel like it's just a random subjective answer. Okay, and then any questions on number 7? And then any questions on this passage as a whole? All right, let me stop that. Okay, so as before, let me post the answer. And then give me a second to grab the Google link version of this. Here is the full answer key. Oh, I sent it just to one person, sorry. Here is to everybody. Here is the Google link. And then I'm going to go ahead and post another passage. Don't start. You guys will do this on your own, but I just want to time you. So I'm going to post that one. Go. Same thing. Let me grab the link. So everyone should have the full passage and answer key for the Armenian alphabet passage, and then everyone should have a new passage, medicine as an occupation, number 10. Does anyone not have the next passage? Lexi's got it. Yeah, so most people got it. Does anyone not have it? But Lexi, I'm glad you, and I know Phyllis got the drive. Okay, so I think we should be good. Okay, so we're going to treat this one again like a skimming. And I know it's kind of a new technique, but we just got to try it out. So I'm gonna give you 6 minutes. Just try to get the process done of 3 minutes reading, skimming, 3 minutes answering questions. Your goal is to answer as many questions as you can in the short amount of time. Obviously, and many of them correct. You might not get to all questions, right? That's part of this process, is you accepting that you're not going to do them all necessarily. There's 8 questions, so that might be tough to get done in 6 minutes. It's really more about like, how much can I get done in the short amount of time? So you're maximizing, right? So try the easy ones, leave the harder ones for later, leave the ones that waste time later, right? So unless there's any questions, we'll go for 6 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. All right, on your mark, get set, and go. All right. It's been 6 minutes. So the question is, I mean, I don't, if someone got through all 8, that's amazing. But how many people got through at least like 5 of the 8? You got to 1. Okay, so you're spending too much time on the reading, right? If someone got to 5, great. So again, someone got to 4, awesome. Jonathan, you said you were highlighting. Yeah, you're supposed to do the skim process. So if you got to 1, then you're on track, because 5 minutes reading, 1 minute for the question. And Leandro, please don't jump down a flight of stairs. We'll go ahead, everyone take a few more minutes to try this again. Again, we were attempting the skimming process on this one, which apparently some people did not do. But okay, everyone take just a few more minutes. Continue on the skimming process, meaning that you're still, you're working quickly on it, right? And we will reconvene in a couple minutes. All right, it's been maybe about a total of 10 minutes. Does anyone need more time? Okay, so as of before, I'll throw got to 6. Jonathan, you're almost there. 2 more to go. You could finish off while I'm typing answers. Again, I'll type answers in, and then we will review all together in a second. Okay, so again, everyone take a second to just look at the answers, compare what you got, and then we will go through them one at a time, as we always do. And then we'll have time for one more passage after this. Okay, questions on number 1. Again, we'll just go in order. Questions on number 1. Questions on number 2. Yeah, people don't like question 7. We will get to it, just because we don't really use this timing anymore. But going back to number 2, Michaela, I'm assuming that's about number 2, Michaela. Is D too specific? It's not so much so Michaela, I guess I'll answer D. It's not so much that it's too specific, is that it's actually not complete. So the author implies that it's really a few things, not just the one. So I don't know, maybe to answer your question, maybe it is too specific, but it's really not complete enough in terms of an answer. It can be inferred. Okay, and someone asked here, why is B not good for 2? We don't know anything about caffeine, I believe, from the passage. Do I remember that correctly? I think the closest thing we have there is cocoa. That's not caffeine. Right here, closest equals cocoa. I'm just going to go back. Yeah, we are still on question 2. Let me go back to just so quickly, just because it'll be quicker. What paragraph was that in? I have a bunch of highlights here. I just gotta let's go back and read how it said. Blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I just found it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not the coca, meaning the cocaine plant, not the cacao, which would be the coffee bean plant. So I think that's what the difference is. Different stimulant for sure. Any exactly. You know, like I said, different stimulants. So any other questions on 2? The question on 3. Oh, going back to question 2, was there any supporting evidence for 2? Okay, so again, it's an inference question, right? So part of what you're doing is taking something author said and then concluding one of these answers. And so the difference here is that we have the juxtaposition of farm workers and doing the agricultural thing versus the hunter-gatherer thing. And so modern Western society is more agricultural based and therefore more sedentary than hunter-gatherer societies who traveled around and did their thing that way. So again, the answer for A isn't mentioned, but that's the point. It's inferred. So something author said leads you to this answer. That's just a very important point to make for how to approach all the ones that are inferred or implied or whatever. All right, questions on 3 then, to jump back there. Question on number 4 then. I think we're good on 3. Any questions on 5? Oh, Michaela said, why not B? Is this for number 4, I assume? Oh yeah, because 3 and 5 are B. So yeah, that would have to be 4. Okay, 4. 4 says, what has a study of the Kalahari Bush people provided to medical anthropologists as positive evidence about the development of medicine? So where in the passage do we go to figure this out? And lecture, we'll get to number 5 in a second. All right, so we go back to the first paragraph. Comparison with similar groups today, for instance, the Kalahari Bush people suggest they would have managed the health collectively without experts. Right, so that's what they as a group of people have done. So the question is, what does the study of the Kalahari Bush people provided to medical anthropologists as positive evidence about the development of medicine? So they as a group of people represent what was done like before it developed into the specialty. So while B might be true, B is not like answering the way the question is being asked. Cool. Okay, I think we're okay. I think we're good with 4 questions on 5, and I believe Lexi had a question. Someone had a question on 5. Number 5, the word métier is best translated as blank, right? And so we go back to line 25. And again, it's always good to read above and below it. I would start from like what line 20, what 3 or 2. Communities developed hierarchical systems identified by wealth, power, and prestige. And I guess actually I should share. Forgot to share the actual document. Oh, wrong one. I'll come back to it. Communities develop hierarchical systems identified by wealth, power, and prestige with an emergent division of labor. Right, medical expertise became the métier of particular individuals. Right, so we have this idea of division of labor and then specific individuals. Although the family remained the first line of defense against illness, it was bolstered by medicine men, diviners, witch smellers, and shamans, and blah 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 blah, etc. So you have this idea of like the division that we have an emergent division of labor, and then particular experts, individuals becoming medical experts. And so the trade means like your profession, and so that's really what they're getting into. Right, so it's not, you have specific people going into specific things that they're doing. Real quick, for whoever asked me about the whole translated into, oh, you understand that? Okay, great. Just to be sure. I mean, it's important on those word ones. Get like 2 lines above and below it. Like really get that context to understand it. Sometimes just literally reading the next line will maybe change how you think about it. So get the context is really really important. Okay, someone had a question on 6. I'd like to do an analysis of 6. Okay, 6 says, which of the following assertions, if true, would most weaken the central argument presented in the passage by the author? Okay, so how do we approach this question? Like, what are we supposed to think of when we read that? Like, what are some things we take going in is really what we're looking for. Yeah, so Jonathan says, yeah, what the central argument is. So yeah, really understand the author's thesis, if you will. Also, notice we're looking for the thing that will most weaken it. So you want to pick the thing that goes against the main idea the most, right? As opposed to supporting it. And then the other thing, which sometimes we fall into this trap, it says, which of the following assertions, if true? So you're assuming they are all true, right? You're not like arguing against the validity of any of these statements. You assume A, B, and C, and D are all true statements. There's nothing to argue with. What you're looking for is which one of these goes the most against the author, right? So one might go with the author, one might go a little against. You're looking for the one that goes the most against the author. So yes, trying to think of main idea and then finding out what goes against that the most is the way to go. So A says some shamans deliberately use magic to get back at their enemies. So does that go against the main idea? And if it does, in which way does it, and how deep does it go against the main idea? That's really what you're thinking of. Oh, because it's straight up, no, yeah, no, it doesn't really. I mean, shamans, they use magic to do certain things, so it doesn't even really it's not the central argument, but nor does it go against anything being said, right? B, Assyrian society was the first one formally to recognize medicine as an occupation. Does that go against the main idea, or does it like support it, right? These are the kind of things we're looking at. Like, does it fit? Is it in line with the main idea? Is it against it? If it's in line, it doesn't really matter. We can ignore it. If it's against it, then we put it in the category of like, if I have more than one against it, I decide which one is going to be the most against. So is this in line or is it against? So again, anyone for B, is that in line or is it against? I think it's always like the first thing I ask on these questions. Someone admits that they don't understand the author's main point. So maybe that's going back to what we talked about before. We need to understand that before going in. So what is the author's main point in this case? So what, actually, I'm going to put this back. So Marissa says development of medical profession and a change in how sick people are taken care of. Yeah, it's ultimately, it's kind of like that. So from the previous question about the Colorado Bush people, right? We used to have it like as a communal thing, a society, a thing that like people all helped in, but over time it became more and more and more and more specialized. So if you look at B actually fits right in line with that argument, right? B is not at all against what the author is getting at. So that just wouldn't fit. Right? And then we get to C. C says the earliest hard evidence at many sites for healers being recognized as a special social subgroup consistently predates evidence at these same places for the cultivation of crops and emergence of epidemics. So the reason C is the right answer is because we have the relationship backwards. In the past, is they're saying that as hunter-gatherer societies, we kind of did things one way, and then as we settled and had agriculture, then we started seeing the specialty thing emerge. C flips that relationship, so that goes against the thesis of how it worked according to the author. Does that make sense? I guess we can look at D as well, but I believe that at least answers it. So C isn't referring to shamans. I can go back and try to connect that, but we're just looking at like the specialty being done before the cultivation, which is the wrong order according to the author. And all this is actually way in the past. So you're just taking really the order of things being given in terms of their evidence. Right. But, and I think, Leandro, I think it's kind of the point here is that if this statement were true, yes, it was a long time ago, but this is going against how the author presented it. The author presented like hunter-gatherer society, then we start agriculture, then we start specialization because of the settling down. C just has everything reversed. So that goes against the argument. Okay, and then I think everyone had questions on 7, if I remember correctly from when we first started this. Okay, 7 says the graphic evidence. Actually, I'm going to change where my chat is. There we go. That's easier. The graphic evidence mentioned by the author that indicates the possible existence of early medicine men appears in blank. And so what do we get from the passage? Which I realize I haven't shared yet, but I don't know if we need it. What do we get from the passage in terms of the time frame? Right, so Jonathan has it here, and it's from paragraph 3, last sentence, I believe. Yeah. Cave paintings found in France some 17,000 years old contain images of men, masks, and animal heads performing ritual dances. These may be the oldest surviving images of medicine men, right? So it's just that last sentence, paragraph 3. And so this is the graphic evidence. And then they're asking about the time frame. So I'm assuming people maybe were thrown by the BCE designation, sometimes referred to as BC. There's different ways to designate it. AD or ACE are other ways to also designate sort of the 0 year, if you will. Is everyone comfortable with that? Or maybe that's what is throwing people. I love it. Completely ignore the Ice Age part. The idea in this question is that we're basically in 2020, so call it 2000. 17,000 years ago would be take 2,000 years away from what's called after common time, or previously this was after the birth of Christ, and then go 15,000 years backwards from there, which would be 15,000 before Christ or before common time. So the way the Western calendar works is that we start at year 1 and now we're up to year 2021. Prior to that, there is no 0 year. And we start at year 1 prior to the other one and go up from there. And 17,000 years ago from today would be 15,000 BCE. So BCE means before common time. So if today is 2020, again, just say 2000. We go back 2,000 years to the first year of after common time, and then we go 15,000 more from there. So that would be 15,000 BCE. And that's true, Jonathan, but you could just estimate, right? We're in 2020, so it's 2000. And as Leandro points out, negative 2,000, well, negative 15,000, right, goes into BE. So we go backwards from now. 2,000 goes to 1, because there is no year 0 technically in the Western calendar. And then we go backwards from there. So the difference here is there is year 1 equals what's called AD or ACE time. Okay, and then prior to that, would be BC or BCE. I think there might even be a third way to say it. It used to be based off a religious idea of the before the birth of Christ and after the birth of Christ. That was over time changed into more a secular issue of before common time, after common time. Okay, and then everyone cool with 7 then? Even though that's kind of weird. Okay, and then any questions on number 8? Any questions on number 8? Okay, here is the full answer key for 8. I'm also going to post the next passage, and then Phyllis, give me a second, I'll grab the links. Do not start the next passage. We will do that. We're not going to do this together, but I will time you on it. To give you a heads up, it is a astronomy passage, so get your brain ready, because those are always just a little harder. The thing about astronomy passage, this is what I want them doing in class, is that you don't have to know any astronomy to get through an astronomy passage. What you need to be able to do is still apply your reading. So you're just going to be reading on topics about space and whatnot, but it still doesn't negate the reading aspect of it, right? If you go to a lot of these astronomy passages, you might have like a question or two that asks about math, but ultimately it's still about like the ideas and connecting ideas from one paragraph to another. So you don't treat it necessarily indifferent. It just feels a little more daunting, and it can be a little more thick, but that's where it can be a little tricky. So give me a second. I'm just getting my links. Okay, Phyllis, whoever needs the Google link, here is the answer key for the medicine one. And then here is the astronomy passage. Note that it's a little bit longer than normal. I think it's kind of from an old exam, if you will. And there's 9 questions. So again, it's just longer in many different ways. So what we'll do is we'll start right at 3:48. We'll go right up until 4 for the timing. And then, if you got to leave, I'll give the answers, but I'll stick around and go over all the answers as needed. Before we do start, are there any questions? And does anyone need the passage? I think it's posted so everyone can get it, but just to be sure. And no, never skim an astronomy passage. So do not. You'll hate yourself. I think if someone said they're going to throw themselves downstairs, it'll be like double. So yeah, do this one regular. Yes, Leandra, I'll send it to you privately. And yeah, work until 4. If you need to leave, then I'll post answers, and then we will reconvene. All right, good luck, and we'll come right back. All right, it has been 12 minutes and it's a doozy of a passage. Does anyone need more time? And it's okay if you do. I just want to check in where everyone's at. Someone says they're finished. Nope. Someone just has an exclamation point. Oh, that was from the other finish. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so how does everyone feel after doing that? All right, actually, look at that. Positivity. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna, like before, give the answers. Lap is medium. Yeah. Does no one want to throw themselves downstairs like before? I think I'm hoping for none of that. So, okay, I'm gonna, if possible, actually, no one comment. Let me just get all these answers in because then it'll be all in one shot. 50. All right, now you can comment. And these are all the answers. Just go ahead, check your work, and then we'll review. If you do have to go, let me know. I could post the answers, but I definitely highly encourage just kind of sticking around and talking stuff out. That's, I think, the only real way to get better at this, right? Going through the process, kind of questioning everything and going from there. And I mentioned this before, but notice, it's an astronomy passage, but you didn't really need to do any math in it at all. Everything was just more like, conceptual GRB and what's going on and how do we detect them. And it's still just like connecting one idea from another. Okay, any questions on number 1 on the front side? No problem, Jonathan, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and post just so everyone has it. But I do, like I said, I do encourage everyone to stay. I know once you got the answers, you guys gonna be out, but please stick around. But if you have to go, understand. But yeah, stick around if you want to talk about stuff. But here is the answer.